followed everything that they sent the link through. I spoke to you about it. Anyway, I'm sure it's one of those things.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the, I think one of the most important events, I would say that, but communicating responsible tourism to secure market advantage. So how do we sell responsible tourism and responsible tourism holidays to customers? My name is Justin Francis. I run a business called responsibletravel.com, which is an online agency specializing in selling responsible tourism. And I also organize the World Responsible Tourism Awards, which I hope many of you who might be interested in responsible tourism will come to tomorrow in Platinum Suite 3 and 4. And you're also welcome to come to our party, which is tomorrow evening, just in town, but you'd all be very welcome there. Okay, so the format for this event is that I will introduce our 4 speakers who will speak for 6 or 7 minutes each about this theme. And then at the end of that, we'll allow plenty of time for questions. And having done a few of these events in the past myself, they are far better for everybody, far better for the speakers, and far better for you if we do get into a conversation around it. So I hope you will think of some great questions to ask them as we go through. So just briefly before we start, I said I felt this was one of the most important events in the responsible tourism seminars. Why do I feel that? Well, we all have great expectations of how tourism might be a force for good. It might address poverty. It might create jobs and livelihoods. It might help us conserve habitats and indeed preserve culture. But that's dependent on one thing, and that's dependent on us selling holidays. All of those things are pipe dreams unless we can turn our good works into bookings and tourists. And I think the tourism world and the responsible tourism world is littered with people who've had good intentions about the way in which they wanted to design tourism, but have failed in the issue of communications and marketing. So that's really what we want to address in this session. To kick us off, I'm going to introduce Sarah Holloway. Sarah is a independent consultant in strategy and communications around sustainability. And she started her career in a communications agency where she worked with some really huge clients, L'Oreal, Shell, and the British Council. She then moved in-house and was at TUI Travel, one of the biggest tour operators in the world. Also at Tesco, our biggest supermarket here in Britain, and at Unilever. So Sarah spent a lot of her career understanding how to create change in very big organizations. And I'm particularly interested in her wider perspective on communicating sustainability, because we sometimes forget that we're not the only industry that's trying to communicate sustainability, and there's some good lessons to learn. So, Sarah, over to you. I'll get you lined up. That's yours there, isn't it?
Thanks very much, Justin. It's such a pleasure to be here talking to you all today. As Justin indicated, I'm a bit of a fugitive from responsible tourism. Having worked for TUI and their brilliant team there, ran off to join the consumer goods sector and grapple with their sustainability challenges. And boy, did they have some big sustainability challenges as well. So having gone from TUI, where we were looking at engaging people in responsible tourism, if I thought that was difficult, then getting shoppers in the UK's biggest supermarket to think about their carbon footprint as they chose their products, that was even worse. And then I moved to Unilever and worked out that they had a huge challenge in communicating what was a really lovely, robust sustainability programme through not one product or type of product even, but through hundreds. And through all that, I learned an awful lot, and it's been a bit of an interesting ride. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to say to you today, I thought I would come up with a big, long, really, really impressive list of things that I knew that I could tell you. But I can't come up with the definitive answer, because actually I don't think any sector has really absolutely cracked this sustainability communications issue, because the challenges are the same in all of our sectors. Busy people, people who care about some things, but we can't seem to connect them to the things that we're doing. And that's true across the board. But what I wanted to say to you is really encapsulated in a single thought. One thing I wanted to say about how to talk to people about responsible tourism, which is engaging and exciting and forward-looking and brilliant. And that is, don't talk about it. Don't talk about responsible tourism. Don't even try. And I probably should clarify what I'm saying by that before I sort of just get down off this podium and leave and go and have a cup of coffee. I'm not saying don't do responsible tourism. I'm not saying don't look at all the areas of your holiday, whichever part of the industry you're in, and work out how it can be better for people and the planet. I'm not going to go into a big business case here, because I think the people who have come to a session on responsible tourism probably don't need that. I'm not even saying don't ever talk about responsible tourism, because there are plenty of opportunities to do so for people who really understand it. Some of our stakeholders, like investors, people in the same community as us, even some consumers who are out there actively looking for a better type of holiday, are really motivated by it. But as you'll see from my background, I've mainly worked with mainstream consumers, and we call them mainstream consumers all the time, but actually I prefer to think of them as normal people. People who wouldn't come to a session called Communicating Responsible Tourism, and who therefore we have to make a bit of a leap of imagination to imagine ourselves in their shoes. If we use the jargon, if we use responsible tourism or sustainable tourism or green tourism or any of those words, we're creating an extra job for ourselves. Job number one, we have to explain what we mean by it. And job number two, we have to explain why someone should care about the thing we've just explained to them. And that's an awful lot of work. It's an awful lot of work. And if you're trying to sell somebody a holiday and you have a small sliver of their time to do it, it's too much work. What would be better, much, much better, if you could find a way to get them to that caring part without having to go through that long process of double explanation. And I found there are companies who are beginning to find ways of doing this, to take shortcuts that can help us understand what we should be doing. So let me give you a couple of examples from companies that I've worked for. This is Knorr. It's a brand owned by Unilever. They make stock cubes and ready-made soups and sauces, things that help you speed up your cooking. It's quite, you may already know that Unilever has an industry-leading program called the Sustainable Living Plan that most people have heard of if they work in the sustainability community. And part of that is a sustainable agriculture program that's really robust. They have their own code. They've worked incredibly hard over a number of years to make it work. Do they talk about it on the front of the packet of Knorr? Well, no. And do they talk about it to consumers? No, not really. Most consumers don't understand the phrase sustainable agriculture, and that's why it's not there. If you look in that bottom corner right there, which is quite dark because of the way it looks, what they've done is done some consumer research to say, okay, well, what can we talk about? Can we talk about sustainable agriculture? Can we get people to understand it? And the answer came back as a resounding no. It's too complicated an issue because it encompasses labour rights, it encompasses fertilisers, it encompasses a fair price for people. It's too many issues rolled into one. But what they did was to ask them what they did value. And they found that Knorr's consumers valued feeding their families good, wholesome food. And that it wasn't too much of a leap from that to valuing something that was natural and good and had been grown in a natural way and in the right way with the sun and with not too many pesticides. So that's what they did. And just in this corner here, in German, it says, "Great taste is in our nature," because that's the message they came up with. Now, this is still a sustainable agriculture communication, because without that program sitting behind it, you'd have no evidence for the claim that's on the pack. So we're still talking about the sustainability aspect of things. It's just that it's linked to people's values. So that's the first of two messages I have for you today, which is start from where your customers are and understand their values and build up from there. What is it that people value most about your product in their lives? And can you link what it is about responsible tourism you're trying to sell to those existing values, rather than trying to get them to care about something new? The second example I want to share with you today is at Tesco, the other in-house place that I worked. Tesco has quite a strong history of sustainability commitments, and they aim to help their customers cut their carbon footprints in half by 2020. Now, chances are you haven't heard of that in a way that you've heard of the Unilever commitments, and part of the reason for that is it that it improved incredibly difficult to talk to shoppers about it. And there's a few reasons for it. First of all, a supermarket is a terrible place to put across any sort of message. People who are in a supermarket do not want to be in a supermarket. It's busy and stressful. If you've got kids, it's even worse. You're prepared to spend maybe 5-10 seconds comparing a product with another product to make a very simple decision. It's not the place to start engaging someone on the concept of a carbon footprint, because you won't get anywhere. So those sorts of communications really didn't work in store. Secondly, with supermarkets, and I suspect with tourism as well, consumers don't expect to be engaged on a lot of these sorts of things. They expect the big companies to be taking care of it. So if you as a supermarket ask someone to choose between a relatively high carbon product and a lower carbon product, the question comes back, well, why are you even selling me the higher carbon product? Shouldn't you have taken care of this? Shouldn't you have cut the carbon out of this product? And I think thirdly, there's an issue of fit. So if you get through all those, the other question that comes up in your mind when your supermarket starts saying, have you thought about your carbon footprint, is, why on earth is my supermarket asking me about this? What right have they to talk to me about this? And that's something I think that's built up over many years, and it's difficult to go straight in. But recently, Tesco have changed their strategy. You may have seen, if you've been in the UK in the last few weeks, some headlines a bit like this one, where Tesco did some research into their bagged salads in particular, and found that 2/3 of them end up in the bin, much of it unopened entirely. And they've made some promises around changing their buy one, get one free offers, which encourages people to buy much more than they want. And this is just part of a new strategy that they've pulled together, really trying to address that issue of fitting with what someone expects a supermarket to talk to them about. So they are addressing three main areas. They're addressing food waste, as in this newspaper article. They're looking at the fight against obesity, and they're looking at job creation. And if you think about those three things, they all fit with what we think a supermarket can do. They're all big societal problems that they have a clear role in solving, a much clearer role than climate change. It's really important to note that they still have those same climate change commitments and they're still working on them. But as far as the focus of their communications are concerned, they've really tried to fit them more into their consumers' expectations. So I think my second message would be to communicate on the big and unique contribution that you can make. You can make as the travel industry, because it has to fit with what you do. So how does all of this fit with responsible tourism? Well, in my view, the level of consumer engagement, of holidaymaker engagement in responsible tourism, is pretty good on a lot of fronts. I think in terms of communicating the sustainability activities that companies large and small are doing, it's going out there, there are good messages going out, and in certain areas it's been really effective. So on things like getting people to reuse their towels in hotels, there's been a long campaign to help people engage with that issue, and now it's just normalised. I expect to be asked now by my hotel to reuse my towels, and that's great. It's great as far as it goes, but stacked up against re-engineering your brand along sustainability lines like Knorr has done, or tackling one of the biggest issues that faces your industry like Tesco is beginning to do, it seems lacking in ambition somehow. And I think my message to you would be that as good as the communications I've seen have been in travel, and some of them are very good, they could be so much better. I think there is a big unique contribution that travel can make that's not being touched upon. There is a big ask to make of tourists that's not being asked. And so my challenge to you would be to ask yourself this question: what is tourism's big contribution? What is the big good that tourism does in the world that you can ask people to join you in doing? And I think counterintuitively, the bigger the ask of somebody, the bigger the thing they're being asked to join, the more likely you are to get them to join it. Consumers aren't stupid, and they know that reusing their towels or choosing a slightly more carbon-friendly airline is not going to make a massive difference. But if you give them the opportunity to do something that will make a massive difference, then they'll be more likely to join you, and although it will be hard, the results will be faster to come. Just to give you a few things to think about, I don't know what the answer to this question is. What is tourism's big contribution? I've got a couple of ideas which I'm happy to share, but I really like to hear from the room. Justin, if you don't mind, in our Q&A session, perhaps that could be one of the questions to everybody. But here are the criteria. One huge contribution, not a concept covering several issues. What is the thing? Something that's unique to tourism that fits just like that Tesco food waste thing fits. And something crucially that you don't have to explain to consumers why it's worth doing, because it speaks to their values. And linking it with people's values, I think, is crucial. So I'd say I've seen a few sectors begin to move beyond communicating what you're doing in your sustainability strategy to communicating things that promote change. And I'd love to see tourism do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So next up, Jo Hendricks. Jo works for Thomas Cook. I think there's very few really true global brands in tourism, and Thomas Cook is absolutely one of them. Jo is the Sustainable Destinations Manager at Thomas Cook. She started as a holiday rep and has had a variety of roles in mainstream tourism and particularly in destinations. Thomas Cook is, as you know, a global business, and Jo has recently created a sustainability framework which will enable all of their destinations to come together around these principles of sustainability. And she's more recently designed something which I think is really quite exciting, which is a local excursion concept. And I know she's going to speak about that, and there's some exciting stuff to hear about that. So I think Jo draws a lot of inspiration from your colleagues in destinations around the world, from the sharp end of where it's all at, the tourists in the destination, and I think that's got to be a good place to start. So, Jo, to you. Just find yours. Remind me. There we are.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and speak about something that I do think is really exciting. And I'd also like to thank Sarah, because a lot of what she's talked about has been a great introduction to what I'm actually going to say today, which again is I found in the past 12, 18 months or so, the way to get on and for me to move sustainable tourism forward is to completely remove the word sustainable from anything that I do. And that's not just with the customers, that's with our own staff internally as well, to try and get people to really, really understand this message. So that's clearly not just an issue outside of tourism. What I want to talk about today is something called our local label, and that came about because I listened to what our overseas destination managers were telling us, information that they were feeding back. They knew that their customers wanted to get out and experience things that were local, authentic, traditional in those destinations. And at the same time, we had a programme of work where we wanted to look at how we improved our margins on our excursion programmes overseas. And I was able to see that there would be a good link there. So together with a couple of our heads of operations, which are people that look after a regional geographic area, we came up with something that would translate into all of our source market languages, because I also have to think about how Thomas Cook Germany, Thomas Cook France, our Scandinavian friends would be able to view this message. So the word local seems to translate really well in lots of different languages. And what we wanted the local label to do is exactly what it says on the slide up there for you to be able to read for yourselves. We wanted to look at our excursion programme and give some additional priority to the excursions that really go that extra mile to play their part in the destinations. And all the destinations are very different. But one way that we did find we could do this in a consistent way was to use the Travel Foundation's Greener Excursions checklist, which was great because it meant I didn't have to come up with something myself. And this was put together in a really easy to follow way, and we just made some very small adaptations so that it could work for Thomas Cook. So what we asked everyone to do, we've got about 80 destinations around the world. We asked those resorts and their resort managers and their staff to look at the current excursion programme, so things that we'd had on that programme for many years, and assess them against that checklist. Now, they couldn't do all of them. In some cases, there could be 20 or 30 excursions in one destination. but because our managers have been around for a long time, they already had an idea of which ones would be able to fit those checklists. Some of them that found perhaps they didn't have any excursions that fitted that checklist were able to design and create new ones. So we decided that we'd have an internal panel that was from the heads of operations themselves, people from across our source markets, and also we sent approximately 1 in 5 of those applications back to a member of staff at the Travel Foundation to help us have an external view to make sure that that process was a little bit more robust. And then once all those component parts complied with the Travel Foundation's Greener Excursions checklist, we then said to Resort, okay, you can use that logo. So we've got locally Spain, locally Turkey, locally wherever it might be in the world, and you can use that strapline. So what they were going to do, when you get an event planner, if you go on holiday with a charter company, you generally tend to get a list of things you can choose from. They could put the little logo on its own next to each of those events that had been awarded it, and the strapline just went somewhere within the events planner so that people knew what it actually meant. Then I realised that it was very, very, very popular, and I hadn't quite anticipated how popular it was going to be, and I gave myself an inordinate amount of work to do, and it resulted in 40 local label excursions this year. I'd hoped I might have got about 10. So to get 40, we had probably about 72 actually go through the application process, if you like, but we were being robust. I think people thought I was going to be a little bit, oh no, it's all right, we'll work with them, it'll pass, but I did put my foot down, so it was done in a robust way. And it's quite interesting because the fellow that was really behind it and helping me to push it was actually the regional manager for Greece. And it just goes to show, I think, that when you've got somebody that's really, really positive and engaged about it, that's where we seem to have most of those local labels. And he was kind of the lead out of all of those heads of operations, if you like. So that's where they are currently as of summer 13. What I'd wanted to do from it, though, was kind of prove to people in the business that maybe still didn't quite believe that sustainability could sell, that it would sell. So when I set out, I seriously hoped that what I wanted to happen would happen, because if it didn't, then potentially I could have lost a lot of that ground, and it would have been a really, really hard uphill struggle to get people to listen to what we were saying. But by getting the reps to talk about it properly, so before we could put any of these labels on there, any of these logos on there, we had to do a whole training session for all of the representatives that were going to deliver this message, if you like, so that they really understood it, so that they were able to pick out, like we tell them to do with every excursion, pick out the kind of unique selling points, the benefits to people. That's what you sell your excursion on. What benefit does this bring you in my welcome meeting of going on that? Don't treat a sustainable excursion any differently. Pick out those features and benefits, and that's what you need to sell it on. So we worked with them on that over the course of the beginning of the season. And you can see from there, I'm basing this at the moment on feedback from just 10 of those 20 destinations, so maybe about 20 or so of the local labels. That's because summer only just finished, really, the summer of summer 13. And I wanted to give people a window of opportunity to come back. So the deadline for all destinations to come back to me is actually the 15th of November, which is still to come. But some of those areas closed down a little bit earlier, start of October, middle of October, and that's the statistics that you can see here today. So it's not a full account of what's happened with the local label yet. But basically, in 2012, the amount of people taking part in the excursions, the exact same excursions, but before we gave it the local label, was that almost 29,000. All we've done is talk about it differently. That's the only thing we've done. It's exactly the same thing. Nothing has changed. And it's gone up. And that just shows to me that people actually do want to have a sustainable experience. Perhaps they just didn't really understand that, or they just didn't realise what it meant, or we just weren't talking about it properly. We also wanted to try and understand not just whether it was good for our business, but whether it was going to be good for a local economy, because I know a lot of people in tourism will stand up and say, it's fine that we fly all over the world because we bring great economic benefit to lots of different places. And I've said that without having necessarily any evidence to back that up before. And it made me think I can't keep standing up and saying that if I don't actually know what's going on. Now, it's going to be very, very hard to take all the different parts of that tourism journey or of that package holiday and look at those advantages to economies. But what we can do with the local label is ask our customers, what do they think of it? How much are they spending in local economies, and get them to tell us. So this is based on just short of 1,500 questionnaires this year. We had them written in English, and we had them written in all our different continental source markets. So I was quite pleased with that return, actually. I thought that was quite good. And it showed the average spend per UK customer was about £9.14, and that could be on souvenirs, on refreshments, on food, on tips, on donations. I can break it down, but I didn't have time to do it for today. But if you add those up all together, those figures, and multiply them by the amount of people, that 36,000 that we know have gone on those local labels in those destinations, that's the potential discretional spend. Now, the way I did it, I asked people to tick, did you spend between £1 and £10? If they've ticked that, I've just put a fiver in. If they did between 10 and 20, well, 11 and 20, I've put 15 in. It was the quickest way that I could do it to get figures for today, because that was a bit of a rush. So it could be a bit less, but it could also be a heck of a lot more. And it's quite difficult to tell because I can't ask them to say exactly what they've been spending. But overall, I think that's really good potential, considering I've still got another 20 labels that I need to take the details from. Did they like it? Because I thought I might think it's brilliant. We might think it's brilliant in Thomas Cook. Do the customers actually like it? So again, we've asked them just to tick their satisfaction. And I've got to say I'm quite pleased with those results as well. But we also asked them to write some qualitative comments. Again, I've not had time to put those together, but some of them are really interesting. Some people wanted to spend longer in places that we'd been a little bit worried would they get bored in. Clearly, that's not the case at all. So we're going to be able to go through those over the winter while we're in a little bit of a quieter period, properly digest all of this information, those statistics, and more importantly, what the customers are telling us, and feed that back into how we operate our excursions for next year. And very importantly, it's a good message, obviously, for those people within the business that may still need a little bit of convincing. There was one really good local label. They're all very good, but this was the first one that actually got passed, and I think this was because they were quite quick off the mark. They already had, this particular supplier, their own sustainability report. They really, really wanted to make sure that people go into the Costa Dorada, so Salou, La Pineda, that type of area north of Spain. 25 minutes outside of Salou, there is some beautiful scenery, some lovely local communities, some great things that are going on, and they wanted to take people to experience that. That actual excursion, they take their own measurements of what people are spending. So we know that almost 5,000 euros of Thomas Cook's customers' money has gone into 2 local villages that this excursion visits, because she actually goes back, the lady that runs this excursion, and asks, what did people buy today? And they give her the exact numbers. So that is an exact match, which is great. What I found really exciting about it, and I went over to Barcelona for the Responsible Tourism and Destinations Conference and tagged a couple of days on so I could do this excursion myself. We went on, I think it was the Saturday. On the Friday, 2 couples had been out on the day trip, and they were back again on the Saturday to do the exact same thing again, because they'd really, really loved it. And it's not a cheap excursion, but they really valued what they got out of that excursion. So bless them, the people that organised it did a slightly different route, so it was a bit more interesting. But the Friday had been a terrible day, it had been raining and it was horrible. Saturday was beautiful, so it actually looked like a different place anyway. But they said they know 4% of people on a week or a 2-week holiday will go back with them again. Nobody does that on any other of our excursions. Very, very unlikely. 19% of the people coming back to the Costa Dorada the year after will go back on that excursion. Most of them have done a half day the first time round, they take the full day the next time that they come back because they've really enjoyed it. And it's great being able to see that that excursion, once people have gone on it, is actually speaking to itself. It's speaking for itself on its own behalf. If we don't promote that, then us as Thomas Cook are missing a trick. And I just thought that was a nice example to give. So to summarise, I know we don't have long to talk today and there's lots of time for questions. I think the local label is most definitely, to me, I knew it would, but there's always that little bit of worry that it might not do, but it has proved that sustainability sells and customers want it, but we just need to use the right language. The suppliers can't believe how amazing it's been, and they want to have us promoting them in brochures and on websites and all sorts of things that mean I would need to train all of our retail staff and travel agents and change things, which I'm going to try and do. But most of all, I think it shows the people in our business that it really does make business sense, and it helps us to drive that change. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. I think that was actually quite momentous. I mean, that data, to me, if that can be further substantiated, if I was your chief financial officer, I'd be all over that, wanting to do more of it, because it looks absolutely fantastic. Okay, next up, Gail. Gail, you have an interesting CV, if you don't mind me saying. Gail's a photographer, a working photographer and a writer. She's also founder of Responsible Photography, which is a small and collaborative and participatory photography holiday enterprise, which facilitates photography trips and activities and projects and campaigns. She has an absolute passion for humanitarian issues, the environment and travel and people and stories. But in case you think that Gail does not have experience in the mainstream tourism industry, she does. She had a 20-year career working for Global Holidays, Grecian Cipriana, Argyle Executive Recruitment, and was on the executive management team of Unijet Holidays and of Air Miles. So, Gail, I'm really looking forward to what you've got to say. Right. Which one's you, Gail? Is that
WTM, one without my name on.
that one there?
That one.
Yeah. Okay, signature.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon, everybody. As the others have said, it's a pleasure to be here. I think I will be coming at this session from a slightly different angle. I'll tell you a little bit about me and my background in the industry, and then talk to you about what I do now, and perhaps pose some questions about what responsible tourism is and some words that I think are overused at the moment. So I grew up in a family of media photographers, but lived in Anglesey, which was a big holiday destination. And I was always going to go either into media or into travel. Initially, I turned down a job with the BBC and went off to Corfu with Thomson Holidays on a 6-week stand-in job as a rep. And for the next 20 years, I never looked back. Now, I joined the industry in 1978, before a lot of you were even born. So I went through the mill, you could say. Fantastic training ground. In the early days, I think we should have had responsible tourism, overbookings, flight delays, all sorts of things. But during the 70s, as package holidays increased, so did the accountability of the tour operators. And I suppose, looking back now, responsible tourism in those days was things like measuring the distance from the beach to the hotel, checking the width of cot bars, looking at the depths of swimming pools, things that now are taken for granted, a lot of health and safety issues. But I progressed up. I was on the senior teams of Unijet, Air Miles. I worked with some of the well-known names in this industry. But I ended up in HR training and communications, and after a series of acquisitions and an awful lot of time spent making people redundant, I thought there is more to life than this. So I took a year out And that was when I started travelling. I'd travelled for work so many times, but I hadn't ever travelled for myself. And I went off to Australia, and I came across a number of small communities, particularly in the outback, who were trying really hard to get themselves off the ground, to encourage people to come and stay with them, to see how they were living, what their life was all about, what their culture was all about. And I thought there is a way of combining this with my interest in photography and still using my travel industry background. So that is when I founded Responsible Photography. And I would describe the organisation as an education organisation, because most of my work is with schools, colleges, and running photography workshops. So collaborative and participative is a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is that it involves everybody. So in the destinations I go to, the people I work with are actively involved in what I do. I set up and run photography projects, and I work with a number of very small partners here in the UK and overseas. And a lot of my work is with children and young people, which is a great thing because they're the future of this industry. And then the holidays that I operate are for a very small number of participants. My business is me, and I run 4 to 6 overseas workshops a year with mostly the same people. So we're a long-term collaboration. And I work with small communities, we support different projects, conservation and income generating. And then alongside that, I can use that experience to write. So it works in quite well. So my photo study experiences are for 3 to 5, 6 people at the most, no more than that. And it's an opportunity not only for people to develop their photography, but to also really see the culture and the way of life. The people involved on the ground and the participants all share their ideas. People share their photography experience and knowledge. And we aim, as I put here, to work ethically and fairly. And to me, that is one of the most important things that responsible tourism has to be. It has to work ethically and fairly in the destination, whether that's the UK or, in my case, Ethiopia, Morocco, Colombia. We have to contribute directly to people's livelihoods. So, for example, I'll use Ethiopia again. I've just come back from there. I pay directly in Ethiopia. It's a bit of a nightmare, but I do. Some operators won't. They'll pay in Italy or the UK. So that money doesn't go into the country or directly to the people. And I feel very strongly about that. As a small business, I can. As a multinational, it's a different ball game. We support small projects, conservation projects, in particular water projects. And I work with a great team who are really passionate about what they do, but don't necessarily have the finance or the knowledge or the training that they would get if they were perhaps working over here. So this is a photograph from Morocco, some of my participants a couple of years ago. It's owned by 4 or 5 brothers. Some of you may know it. It's a great little spot, family run, and in a superb location. So I always try and work with small local people and enjoy their hospitality. We have very strong or strict guidelines for photography, and this is something I feel very passionately about, that we live in a very voyeuristic world, and photography, people will go away on holiday, they'll post the photographs on Facebook with no consideration as to what happens to those photographs, or for the people who perhaps they've photographed, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So when it comes to the photography side of things, I'm teaching photography, but we're also very aware of the cultural, religious sensitivities. We respect the wishes of local people, and I discourage the photography of children. And the reason I do that is If you were on holiday here, if you were down on the beach in Mevagissey or Foy or somewhere, and you saw a group of children playing, how many of you would take their photograph? Some of you. If you were in, I don't know, Agadir, down on the beach, and you saw a group of local children playing, how many of you would take their photograph? Oh, well, that's great. You wouldn't. But what happens is people will photograph children on holiday that they wouldn't dream of doing back here. And then those photographs get posted on Facebook, on social media, on Pinterest. And I think that's wrong. I think it's very different if you've had time and you've got to know people and you've got permission to photograph. But I think it's something that we really do need to think about. And something else I do is raise awareness of copyright, rights-grabbing issues. There are a lot of photography competitions. The travel industry is one of the worst offenders, who will use the photographer's images however they choose. It's what's called rights-grabbing issues. Intrepid are one of the companies. So have a look at the terms and conditions. Again, the reason I raise this is that you go away, you take a photograph of somebody, you enter it for competition. Well, that's fine, so long as that photograph's only used in conjunction with that competition. If it's then used for marketing purposes, and particularly bear in mind that a lot of companies are under the same financial umbrella these days, somebody's photograph can be, I think, exploited. And I think that's wrong and something to think about. The other thing I do, and it's one of the things that people really comment on when they join me on workshops, either here or overseas, I don't put photographs of my participants, my partners or associates on Facebook. The only reason I have Facebook is to stop anybody else using responsible photography. I'll link through to my website, but I won't put my participants' photographs on. I respect the fact that their holiday is important to them, it's private, it's personal. And I think that's something else that we need to think about. Now, there's a lot of young people here who perhaps look at Facebook in a different light, and a lot of people live their life on Facebook. But I can quote a story from somebody in Marrakesh whose daughter was photographed. She ended up, this is a Moroccan person, her photograph on Facebook and on a postcard, and the family were most distressed by that. Responsible tourism, to me, is all about buying directly from the artisans and makers. It's about wearing appropriate clothes, respecting the culture and traditions. And it's about enjoying locally grown and produced food rather than imported. Some of the all-inclusives concern me because I feel that they are to the detriment of a local area. I also get involved through photography with conservation, cultural and environmental issues. And this is where the photography projects come in, because I provide cameras for people. So, for example, down in Chebi in the south of Morocco, local camel boys have got cameras so that they can start photographing their environment. And through doing that, hopefully they will start to appreciate it. Now, at the moment, I've got a picture of a bike here. You can go and do rallying. They have big trucks arrive full of bikes that are churning up the sand dunes. They're building a road straight down to the desert. And this should be a national park. It should be developed for everybody to enjoy. And I think responsible tourism has to start in a destination as well. Cultural issues, the photograph in the middle at the top, I'm trying to explain to some local boys in Ethiopia that they'll never sell their hats if they've got baboon hair on them. So I'm just trying to explain, they take the baboon hair off, they'll have more of an opportunity to sell their hats. And then at the bottom, it's another picture from Morocco, the conflict between water. You've got big hotels, golf courses, watered every day. A few miles down the road, you've got people collecting water from a standpipe. There are some big issues that I think affect responsible tourism that we should be taking ownership of. I've mentioned about how I'm concerned about the consequences of photography and how they're used. There'll be lots more on my website if you'd like to read about that. But most important of all is stop and think about the people you may have photographed on your travels and be respectful of how their image is used or shared. Please don't compromise their trust or integrity. So to summarise, responsible photography, we're long-term collaborations. We work very closely with our partners. And I think I asked them what they thought responsible tourism was. And they used the words attitude, awareness, and respect. They didn't think about the words income or business or customers. It was all around people and their behaviour. And one of the topics that we were meant to comment on, repeats and referrals, well, I get my repeats and referrals a completely personal, word of mouth, people who've travelled with me or have heard of me. And finally, in the days of, in case anybody is wondering in terms of insurance, because I'm an education organisation, my workshops are covered through an insurance policy. So I'm completely covered, and I make that very, very clear to people. So I think that's what I've got to say for now, and I hope there'll be questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. I mean, I guess we often talk about the ethics of tourism, but less about the ethics of tourism marketing. And I think what we heard there was the very act of marketing or photography brings with it its own set of ethical challenges, which is important. Okay, so our final speaker is Dr. Xavier Font, who may be known to many of you. He's well known to me. He's from Leeds Metropolitan University and the International Centre for Responsible Tourism. An expert in responsible tourism marketing. It's worked a lot with industry, it's worked a lot with government in all aspects of sustainable tourism production and consumption, and the most published academic in the world around tourism certification. So this is your man if tourism certification is your issue. But what I'm particularly looking forward to hearing, he has also recently designed a tool to help small businesses, small firms and small businesses who are struggling with how to communicate responsible tourism. That's called Respondeco, and I hope he'll talk about that.
Right, thank you. I feel suitably embarrassed now. I want to walk away. And so let's see where we've got this. Okay. If you like some of the things that you heard earlier on about excursions, I think it's also worthwhile for you to have a look at a new guide that the Travel Foundation is releasing this week on how small potential excursion suppliers should talk to UK tour operators so the product is market ready. And you'll find it on the Travel Foundation website right next to the Green Excursions Guide. I know about it because it's been done in collaboration between Leeds Metropolitan University and Travel Foundation and written by one of our ex-students, Carol Favre, which may be known to a number of you. Okay. Respondeco, basically, I've got a number of brochures here, and if you want to collect some of them afterwards, we've got Anne-Marie at the back that will be giving some out on the way out. And if some of you are interested in some of the products that we talk about and want to enter a prize draw for having a free analysis of your website and your own ability or inability to market your sustainability potential and current practices, give your business card to Anne-Marie afterwards, and we'll do a prize draw afterwards from the people who are in this room today. Okay? So within a week, you can have a report done for you on this. And why am I bothering to do this? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an academic. Why am I dabbling with industry? Well, it's primarily because you are shockingly bad at communicating sustainability. Okay? The majority of sustainability communications I've seen are just terrible. How many of you have a tab on your website called quality? And everything about quality on your website and your product is under that one tab. Right? You wouldn't do it, would you? I mean, you want quality to be right throughout your product. Why do we insist in having one tab called sustainability, and anything about our values and who we are just goes there? If we genuinely want sustainability to permeate, and I think that was great about the presentations we had earlier on, if we generally want it to permeate throughout our product, we have to find a much more clever, much more subtle way of communicating sustainability. So let me just show you some data. And I know I'm not going to spend time looking at it, but the reason why I'm showing you this is because over the last 12 months, we have been looking at all of the responsible tourism-related messages of the recent Responsible Tourism Award winners to try and find out what is the quality of those messages. It's not good. Let me just say that. Okay? Let me just give you an example. Social norms on content. Not one of the 1,800 messages I have seen, okay, and you can see what kind of a sad person I am, you know, for reading all those, not one of them uses social norms. What does that mean? Let me give you an example. If you tell your customers, please reuse your towels, 30% of them on average will do it. If you tell them most customers stay in this hotel reuse the towels, it'll go to 45%. If you tell them most customers have stayed in this very bedroom reuse their towels, it'll go to 65%. Social norms say you do what you believe your peers expect you to do. 1,835 missed opportunities. That's all I can see here. Okay? 6% of the messages show how you can experience sustainability as part of the product. 94% of them show sustainability as detached and distant from the customer experience. That's not good, is it? Okay? 67% try to appeal to your emotions, and only 33% try to focus on logic, factual details. That's mostly actually not because it's a good thing. That's because most of those companies had no facts to communicate. Okay? 56% of the messages basically said, I am using words that will not be understood by my consumer market, by my target audience. Every marketeer will tell you, you never, ever use a word that will be misunderstood by your consumers. And you definitely don't use words that one consumer will understand as something and the other consumer will understand as something else. Can you see the number of opportunities we've got ahead of us? If I see one more hotel that says, I use local food whenever possible, I'll shoot myself. Okay? If my wedding vows had said, I will be a good husband whenever possible, today I would not be here. Okay? So we either take sustainability communication seriously or we give up. Which is the reason why I created this website. In this website, you've got basically 3 years of my research for free for you to go through, including case studies, for you to go and find out, right, well, that's really simple. Why am I not doing that? Or I thought I was doing that, but if I ask my customers, maybe actually it'll come across very, very differently. Okay? So some of you have seen the following slides, which is the reason why I spent longer in the previous one. How many of you companies are very clear of who you're going to tell that you're sustainable and why you're telling them? We already heard earlier on about some of the stats, but there's a large number of consumers that say, yes, I may want to buy a greener hotel compared to a non-green hotel if it's the same price. But actually, for many of us, we just want to think about our holiday. Holidays are selfish times. The key question on holiday is what's in it for me, more than when you're at home. Okay? Very few of your customers will buy from you for altruistic reasons. Very few of you will say, I'll go out of my way and suffer on my holiday because I wanted to buy a green product. Okay? Very few of them also will avoid your product entirely. What you need to really figure out is to which extent does sustainability communicate better product? Why do you tell? We've interviewed more than 200 companies at Leeds Met asking them this question, and they look puzzled at us in that they are not thinking that communicating sustainability is a strategic weapon. Okay? In your case, a weapon of self-destruction. No, but never mind. You may just want to communicate to your customers that you're a sustainable company because you want your current customers to feel good about the things that you do on their behalf. That's fine. Make it clear to them. The worst thing you can do is make your customers feel guilty. That's not what they travel for. You may want to tell them to raise awareness. You may want to tell them that it's sustainable to offer something extra. I've spent so much time helping small companies reduce seasonality, increase customer expenditure, increase loyalty by selling sustainable products as real products, good products, authentic products. The S word, the sustainability one, not the other one, is really unhelpful. What do you actually tell them? Because if you keep telling them, I am a sustainable company, if I'm telling you now, you're all coming for dinner tonight at my house, I'm going to serve you sustainable food, right? What sort of gunk do you think I'm going to give you, right? I quite imagine you'll come ready fed. If I said to you, I'm offering you honest, unadulterated food, you'll say, well, I want to buy that, if nothing else, because I don't want dishonest food.
I don't want adulterated food. So use words that your customer will understand. Sustainability has to primarily sell more fun, because this is what we go on holiday for. Sustainability has to sell cultural immersion. If I stay in a hotel or if I go on a tour that is sustainable, I will get to experience that place much, much better. Sustainability, for God's sake, has to sell better service. Okay? You can use your empathy, you can use sustainability to reduce risk and to increase the perception of trust. If you haven't thought about any of those, think again. Where do you tell sustainability? Certification helps you to sell sustainability only insofar as it tells the customer, there's an awful lot of things that I'm going to tell you on this website. I'm not making it up. Somebody has checked that they're correct. Otherwise, that's it. Certification is very good. Otherwise, as a supply chain management tool, not as a customer communication tool. Okay? It would be a great way of simplifying very complex messages into one single image, providing the customer understand what that image means, or at least they have a general feeling that surely that has to be a good thing. You can use all sorts of other methods of communication. I really haven't got the time for that, because I was given a 7-minute window, and you've got a website now to look at, and hopefully many of you will do. When do I tell? Unlike the Tesco problem that we've got in here, the beauty in tourism is that the customer stays with you for quite a bit of time. What you don't do is repeat the same boring message, I'm a sustainable company whenever possible, at every stage in your customer experience. Think about what information does your customer need at each point in that journey. And the aspects of sustainability you communicate are different. You only communicate at each point in time what helps them make a decision that is useful to their lives. Message relevance is important. Okay? You don't tell them what you want to tell them, you want to tell them what's useful to the customer. And now you're all looking at me puzzled. This is not rocket science. Okay? We're just applying marketing 101 to sustainability. That's it. Now, as you can see, part of my challenge here, and we've got 4 more sections on my website, but I haven't got time in 7 minutes to do those as well. I will help you on the website to use compelling language. I will help you in how to improve the website altogether, how to make it user-friendly, and then how do you communicate all these through your social media as well. And the product that we are basically using through our university is we will do website analysis, we will do training analysis at destination level, we will do action planning at destination. So we'll get groups of companies working together in the same destination and learning from one another. We will then do mentoring with some of these companies, and then for those destinations we do some impact monitoring and evaluation to find out by how much has a number of businesses within that destination improve their product. Because there's no point in having a great glossy brochure at destination level, and then you look at the websites of the individual companies, which ultimately is who you're going to buy the product from. And there's a massive gulf between one and the other. There is no point in Thomas Cook telling you, you can go to all these Travel Life hotels, and then you look at the website of the Travel Life hotel, and it's shocking what they communicate or how they communicate it. Put it this way, the Travel Life content usually is delivered at hotel level by the chief engineer. Why do you let the chief engineer mess around with your communications? You wouldn't allow the communications and PR team to mess with your boiler. Why do you allow the boiler man to mess with your communications? Okay? So we need to think about this differently. Okay? Sustainability communications is a specialist job. Okay? Thank you very much.
Okay, we have 10 minutes for questions, so it's over to you guys. If you could raise your hands if you have a question. If you could make it a question, please, rather than a statement. So questions only, and I can see there's one hand right at the back, gentleman in the back row, and we've got a mic coming round for you. If you could maybe introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello. Hi, my name's Hugh. I'm from travellocal.com. I just want to know what the panel think about the importance of originality in product. So my background is in the big bad tour operator world, and one of the things that we've seen in the last few years is that the research budgets of tour operators have been slashed. And it means that the onus on originality is on the providers now. one of the things that was mentioned earlier about the commercial success of sustainable, responsible touring, it worries me slightly, because originality is not really mentioned, and originality is absolutely of key importance in a structural sense for responsible and sustainable tourism. Let me just quickly tell you why. If you have no differences between all the products that you sell, i.e. originality is zero, more or less, then the price and profitability of your product will trend to zero. So what does the panel think about originality?
Okay, who would like to take that one? Someone who's close to product.
Well, I would just say that I think responsible photography is original, but it's also very difficult to protect that originality, because the moment you put something online, it's a free resource. And I think you comment that operators perhaps don't have the budget to research, but they'll have people reading and looking at what everybody else is doing. And I also think that perhaps that's where responsible travel have come in, is that they're giving the opportunity to a lot of smaller, independent people. They're giving them an opportunity to sell their product online, which they wouldn't otherwise have.
Thank you. Joe, would you like to say? I mean, I guess you're driving at originality in the mainstream sector.
I think with regards to the excursions, obviously, that I've been talking about today, one of the main criteria, as you know, the Travel Foundation list, is authenticity. And unfortunately, for some of us, you do have to balance that with health and safety and insurance and public liability. So there are times when we can't be always as authentic as we would like to be when we take British customers on holiday. But we do try to balance that where possible. But that's one of the differentiating elements of the local labels, and they're not always the same differentiator, because all of the destinations are very different, and all of those excursions do have quite original elements. But one of the best things about it, I think, is in the places where they've created new excursions, they have really thought out of the box, and that's where we're starting to see some of that innovation come through, and that's where I'd like to take it next year, is to look at things that can be more original, that can differentiate across the programme, and that we can perhaps learn those lessons and take that forward.
Thank you. Okay, next question.
Hi.
Yes?
My name is Kumud Sengupta. I'm the managing editor of a sustainable tourism journal called Spotlight on Sustainable Tourism. I have a couple of points to make here. Number one, Thomas Cook, excellent what you're doing.
Could I make sure it's a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Can I make sure you have a question for us?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So the real issue I have with you is, you're assuming that consumers don't care about sustainable tourism, but my recent research shows that they do understand and they are looking for travel service providers, and that's where the real issue is. So do you have any comment on that? Why do you assume consumers don't value or are not looking for sustainable tourism?
I actually think it's the opposite. We know that they want it, and I wouldn't have gone about the local label if I hadn't thought that people did want it or people didn't value it. I think what the issue is that they don't necessarily understand the terms that we talk about it in forums of this nature, for instance. And again, as Sarah alluded to, in mass tourism, we are just talking about normal, general, run-of-the-mill people, and you need to bring those messages to life in a way that they understand that there is something also in it for them. So I certainly think they care about it. Sometimes they just don't realise that they care about it until it's brought to life and it's explained in a different way. So I would say it is absolutely the opposite. We assume that people do, and that it's our responsibility to communicate that and raise that awareness even more.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Fabio. I work as a destination manager in the Dolomites, Italy, and I want to ask you, what is the role of destination management organization in this challenge of communicating sustainability to any of you? I mean, Xavier told us something about training groups, and that's a point, but I would like also to know, because we heard about small and large tour operators, about accommodation, but I'm interested in knowing what's the role of tourism board and destination management organization according to your experience.
Xavier, I'm looking at you for this one.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that they are probably some of the most guilty parts that we've got in here. They seem to be doing brochures just like they did them a long time ago, and I just think that there's very little product creativity in many of these, DMOs. So, and it just seems too glossy. I pretty much never trust the brochure of a DMO. So it seems to me, and then even if you trusted that may exist somewhere and it hasn't been, photoshopped, the gap between what you see there and what you see in the actual brochures of the companies is very big. So it seems to me there's a massive need for becoming destination management organization, not destination marketing organizations necessarily, and doing better product development and helping a number of these companies to understand that they're not in the business of selling beds, they're in the business of selling experiences. So it seems to me, and I understand, linked to the question about originality earlier on, that you've got a difficult job in a way to be able to say, well, you can do a variety of things in our destination, but also here's the range of products, but also here's the product consistency we've got. My feeling as well is that I never trust that the DMO can be honest, because you can't say some products are good and some products are not good and only promote the good ones. So precisely for that reason, I'll never look at DMO marketing materials as a way of making a product choice. At least the tour operator may have a vested interest in making sure they only promote the better products, if nothing else, so they don't get sued. But as a DMO, you just represent everybody that pays your taxes. So I think you've got a really big job to do at destination level, especially when you're going to get criticized the moment you provide some incentives to some companies, some additional benefits to some companies over others.
Okay, thank you. Let's. We've got just about 5 minutes. So if there's any other burning questions, now's your moment. If not, I've got one. Somebody in the back, Kathy.
It was great to hear responsible photography being mentioned today, and I think photography plays a huge role in responsible tourism, and great to see that one of the awards is for photography tomorrow. Do you think there's more scope for big tourism companies to use locally sourced photographs by, particularly in non-Western countries, locally sourced photographers photographs that give a view of the country from the host point of view?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But then if you look at professional photography, there are photographers in every country in the world. It's probably just cheaper for a tour operator to send somebody out from here. One of the things I've done with one of our photography projects is that the photographs they've taken, they're making postcards which they're selling, and some of the local destination marketing companies are actually using their photographs. So yes, I would say there is an opportunity, but I think there always has been an opportunity.
Are the big players making the most?
I'm going to just abuse my position as chair by asking my own question. Sarah, one of the things that we've heard is that sometimes the language of sustainability is too hard for the customer. But it seems to me that travel and tourism is almost unique compared to many other sectors, because many of the impacts are the result of the customer, of the traveller. And they're not with a can of baked beans. You can't eat a can of baked beans in an irresponsible way, or maybe you can, but I haven't seen it. But you can absolutely, the way you behave on holiday is a big part of the impact. So somehow we have got to talk to the customer about sustainability, because they're part of the impacts.
I agree entirely, and actually, thinking about the question I was asking about what is tourism's big contribution, the thing that leaps out at me is exactly that, is how our holidaymakers behave when they're on holiday, particularly with regard to things like the local economic impact of holidays. And I've been sort of, as I've not worked in tourism, I've been sort of following this debate around things like how much of the spend stays in local areas, how much of the local spend in all-inclusive stays in local areas. And actually, I think my feedback on it is that this is potentially a huge area to engage people. This is the thing that tourism does that nobody else does, which is send people out there to go and talk to other people, to go and trade with other people on a one-to-one basis, and to go and swap cultures and understand things about each other. And I think I wonder what a tourism company would look like, even a really big tour operator would look like, if their holidays were geared towards engaging customers in that. We know from research from the Overseas Development Institute that one of the big drivers of how much money people spend in the local community is determined by how much they intend to spend before they even leave. They know pretty much how much they want to leave the confines of their hotel, and they're going to probably
do that. I hope the local label is going to change a little bit of that. But why not start then? Why not come to your local first choice travel agent, everyone in the local area who's booked a holiday to Mexico this year, to come and learn a few words of the language, to come and understand what's out there, and to start the expectation that you're going to be engaged in this great exchange of ideas and money and all sorts of things, and make that what the travel is about, because I think that is sort of speaks to the heart of the values that people have about travelling and brings in the sustainable tourism angle as well.
Okay, maybe one last question. Chrissy at the back.
Is it on?
Yeah.
What do the panel think about the role of talking about irresponsible behaviour? Is there a role for it? Does it help in the sort of plight for responsible tourism, if you like, or does it just make everyone feel more miserable?
You mean to consumers? Before travel, I would limit it somewhat, and then during travel and after travel, I would make it relevant to the customer's needs. So if you have a customer that, and we need to segment the market. I think the problem is we've assumed that we're communicating sustainable tourism to all consumers in exactly the same way. You'd never do this with anything else. So with my loyal repeat customers, I'll communicate responsible tourism as a sense of belonging. I will make them feel valued by saying, people like us, we are real travelers. We understand the place. We don't do X, Y, and Z. To the first-time customer, I will communicate it to them in a very different way. So you'll need to think very carefully about what is the emotional response you want to get from the consumer based on the information you've given them. We're still looking at this as a problem on product. This is a market problem, not a product problem anymore. We know how to switch light bulbs off. We know how to turn the heating down. What we don't know is how to change consumer behavior. And that's because we still keep looking at it as a light bulb problem.
Okay. Could I ask you to just join me in giving everyone a round of applause for their contributions? And thank you so very much for coming.